All right. Geshe. Welcome to the 262nd Power Hour from the Native Wellness Institute. Uh, well, Tomas Karmelo Amaya Leshena. My name is Tomas Karmelo Amaya, and I am in Phoenix, Arizona, which is the ancestral homelands of our Atam relatives, as well as our Yavapai relatives, and some of our Yaqui community as well. And I have the honor to be here with my brother, Josh.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Cocker. I'm Kiowa on my mom's side from Oklahoma and Dr. Carnegie Law and all that area over there. And then on my dad's side, I'm Tongan from the middle of the Pacific. Super stoked to be with you guys. I work with the Indigenous 20 Somethings Project and the Native Wellness Institute. Stoked to be with you guys. And yeah, stoked to get on this conversation and get this going.
Absolutely. And I did not mention, and I need to mention, that I am Yoeme and Ashri on my mom's side and Raramuri on my father's side. I'm also the dad to a 9-month-old little baby girl named Hasea and the partner of Sierra Begay. And we just have this beautiful little home that we like to take care of and create a space for our daughter to grow up in. And so I think this is a very important conversation to have today about toxic masculinity and what it means and how we can address it in a way that is trauma informed so that we can make our community stronger. So again, it's a pleasure to have this conversation with Josh, but also with our community that's tuned in here. So thank you for tuning into this conversation.
Well, the one thing I want to say is feel free to join us in the conversation as well, guys, through the comments section in the video. And we'll have our team and ourselves, keep an eye out for those things and try to answer questions as they come along. And as well as the Native Wellness Institute, shout out to the Noise Foundation for helping us put this up today. Tomas, man, what are you thinking? What's going on in your mind right now? Toxic masculinity, two young dads. And I love the conversations we've already had about them, but yeah, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that it's a beautiful thing to be able to have a focused conversation about something like this. I know that growing up, there was things that I felt that were not okay, but I couldn't put the words to them. And I feel like there's a lot of that. And as I've learned these new tools for healing and how to have conversations about it, things I've learned through the Native Wellness Institute and through our own indigenous lifeways from just lived experiences and, our elders and mentors, and even those younger than me, I feel like I'm in a much better place to have this conversation. And that's to say, there were times where I learned about a term and maybe didn't fully get it until much later in my life. And there were times where, other times where it just all clicked and made sense. And I could see, why a certain expression was put in that way. And so to be a little bit more specific, I grew up in West Phoenix, Arizona, so in the city. And I think there's a unique experience for us as Indigenous people in the cities and for people in general that live in the cities. Also, where we live at in what, mainstream might call certain or different socioeconomic status levels and all that. So I think there's so much to say about our upbringings that affect our impression of what toxic masculinity can be. And so I'm not sure if all of us here that are tuned in have heard that term toxic masculinity, but my general understanding, first, I'd like to say is that the word toxic is referring to something that causes us harm, causes damage to us and to others. And when I think about that and I pair that with the word masculinity, I think of like a certain gender role or things that are assigned sometimes by mainstream culture, a lot of times, which is then informed by settler colonialism a lot of times, especially in this country. And I think of the mix of how our indigenous lifeways and teachings can be at odds with some of those concepts and definitions. And I think it's a lot to navigate through, um, but it's something I'm ready to do, at least for the next hour here with my brother Josh. And so those are just a couple of thoughts just off the jump about just kind of wrapping our heads around what we're talking about when we say toxic masculinity. And to add to that just a little bit more is what behaviors that are deemed masculine or related to men and those identifying in that way are causing harm to other people, be it, you know, other men or other women, other relatives. So those are a couple of preliminary thoughts. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I like that idea of like the term being able to give framework to thoughts and feelings that we already had. Like I definitely agree with kind of growing up and seeing a lot of things happen around me, and like I began to categorize them and define them in my mind as like, man, that was messed up, or that wasn't cool, and like the worst of those being that was effed up. But that was like the extent of the framework, and I feel like now, being able to define those things like helps better isolate like the behavior in my mind. Um, and you know, I've been working in wilderness therapy and as like an outdoor instructor before I was working with the Native Wellness Institute. Now being a young father, like I've had these things present on my mind for a long time. So um, a lot of like toxic masculine behavior is unbecoming of a guide in the wilderness. Like you spend a lot of time one on one with your clients in the woods, you know, for 24 hours at a time. If you're out there for 7 days, it's the entire time. Like you're there when they go to sleep, you're there when they wake up. And so you really have to make sure that like, you know, they train us on everything from like correct hand positioning in case of like an emergency safety situation, to like the style of communication after the sun goes down. Like you have to maintain these strict guidelines to not just to protect yourself, you know. And then it went into like, you know, Native Wellness Institute. Now we're looking at it in a different way. Now it's like, how do we combat these behaviors and these attitudes really, and thought process to be able to like help our people heal. And now I'm a dad, and I'm like, toxic masculinity has no place in this house because I have a daughter, and the last thing that I want is my baby girl running into some egghead who thinks he's the man, you know, and can tell her like, "Oh, better get in there and make me a sandwich," you know. That's not happening. So like, I love the idea of kind of defining the terms like we're doing now, and then exploring the concept, and also talking about some of the work that our project has been doing. Like for everyone watching, if you guys haven't seen the Tacona film, we're gonna be potentially showing that today, talking about it too. And it was directed by, I don't know where you are on your screen, by Tomas. Yeah, it's an awesome piece. It's an awesome piece. And Shay. So yeah, those are my thoughts, man. Those are my thoughts. But let's get this going. Did you have some definitions that you were wanting to like read off from diction? I know we were talking about defining terms before.
Yeah, I think just those general ones that I went over just previously. Just wanted to give some like a kind of like a little launching pad for what we're talking about as far as the words um, on their own. So toxic and then masculinity, but then the combination of it and what it's referring to, and I think it's important to note that a lot of times we enter these vulnerable spaces and we talk about things that are very triggering to our communities, and so it's always important to just keep that in mind, that some of the things that we talk about, whether it's the stories and things that have happened to us or to some of our relatives, or even the own struggles that we've had in our healing journey, that we just remind ourselves to kind of check in and make sure we're okay. Um, I certainly am I'm sometimes overwhelmed with the stories I hear of people that I might not have expected to have been on the receiving end of toxic masculinity. and that comes in different forms in the sense of we're all susceptible to it in our work environments, online, you know, all this type of mentality and behavior can really affect every part of our lives. And there are even instances when we're not aware of it. It can be either in your face or it can be stealthy, it could be passive aggressive. And I think that we touched upon one of the main points is like, how do we identify this type of behavior and knowing that, and then understanding some of the tools that we have to address the behavior and look at it in a constructive way and to help our relatives and to help ourselves through it is really important. And one of the things that I was thinking about this very topic as well is this is not to excuse behaviors. This is to understand behaviors so that we can uplift our communities, so that we can find the causes and effects and the things that basically create the circumstances where this happens, and to show accountability as well. So it's kind of a big topic that affects a lot of our lives, and so that's why I wanted to approach it in that way, where we can start kind of really big and open and then zero right in. But a couple of the things that you said, Josh, like resonated with me, where I was young and I see certain things and where it's like, you know, certain like forced gender roles onto people, saying that, women can only do this, or this idea of like serving a man and different things like that. And as youth, I know that we are very perceptive and we take everything in. And so I think of just how often this happens and how unfortunately we don't always have an opportunity to have these conversations. Um, and right now, I just want to again express that gratitude for even entering this space to say, what is it that is affecting our community um, in this way through toxic masculinity? Um, what are those things exactly? Like, if we can give more examples, I think that would be helpful. And I certainly want to open up to questions here in the chat, because I want to say this too. As we become more knowledgeable about terms, even when we say lateral oppression, for example, they carry a lot of weight and a lot of meaning, and it's sometimes easier to use those words than to understand them. And that's why, following the advice of my mentors, I am a student for life and I'm constantly learning more. Like, I enter this thinking, I want to learn more about toxic masculinity myself through my conversation with Josh and with our community. And I certainly want to acknowledge and pay respect to all our relatives, our scholars, and non-scholars in community that are knowledge bearers and keepers that have been pushing to create this language, to create this space so that we can really identify and deconstruct and break down and really look at these different things that make up the toxic behaviors so that we can heal them effectively. So I don't know, Josh, if you had any like questions off the top of your head, or wanted to zero in on particular scenarios that we can go ahead and try to dissect a little bit ourselves.
Yeah, man. I think we've touched on a lot on what it is in terms of like things that we've experienced in the past, and things that we're, I don't know if you feel the same way, but anticipating in the
Mm,
future, with two baby girls. Um,
yeah.
but I feel like it would almost be easier to answer that question by answering like what it's not. And the reason why I feel that is because, like, based on our cultural teaching. So I come from two different peoples. Those peoples have specific wisdoms that belong to certain places, and our land-based practices tied to those wisdoms is what makes us who we are. So my Kiowa side, like, our wisdom is tied to the plains, and even as far down as Mexico. I heard stories when I was younger that Kiowas used to have a word for monkey. Like, that kind of blows my mind. I don't know when they would have seen a monkey, but they did. And then on my Tongan side, um, we also have strong teachings that are tied to the ocean and tied to our islands and tied to other islands as well too, that have to do with like what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman. Again, we're talking about gender affiliation here, um, which is not a concept that is foreign to us as indigenous people. It's like the popular English term that we use, two spirit. In the Tongan language, we use the word whakaleti, and then in the Samoan language, they say fafafine. Like there's a place for two spirit people in our communities. So when someone has decided, oh, okay, my spirit, like I'm gonna choose to be a man spirit, and I'm gonna do manly things. All right, good for you, bro. Let's get on it. Like let's do this. I think the thing that comes to mind when we talk about these things, like our coming of age ceremonies, right? So we talk about our mother earth, our first mother, and we say things like, you know, in the womb you were supported by your mother's water in the womb, and now you're here and you're supported by your mother's water, you're sustained by it. And so the journey of a man is short, right? It goes from one mother's embrace to the next. That's how far you go. um and they also teach us about, like, you know, you learn to speak the language of the natural world so that you can learn to love our first mother in the right way. The idea behind that, of course, being if you can love the land in the right way, then you can love her daughters, the daughters of creation, in the correct way. Yeah. On my Tongan side, we have what's called like a fahu. It's built into our familial structure. And what that is the firstborn of the firstborn of the firstborn daughter is the head of the family. So at my wedding, it would be my oldest sister, because she is in line with those teachings. She would get like half the presents of the wedding. When her kids come to my house, they eat first before my kids, who live in the house that I am in. Like these things that our cultures have, these cultural practices that are built around the principles, like they're built there for the specific reason to teach us how to treat one another. Um, you know, there's teachings about like how women can support life in ways that men can't. And it doesn't mean that one is better than the other, but it is to support and uplift each other in the roles in which like our spirits and our bodies have been called to fulfill, right? Because our life is not our own. We belong to our people. The language I speak, not my own. The body I have, I didn't come up with it. The air that I breathe isn't even my own. And so when we're gifted all of these things, we have the opportunity to gift back. And we can do that by being a good, healthy, masculine figure in our family and like in our community. Um, and the reason why like I take it I kind of this approach is because, and like what is toxic masculinity, bro? We could deep dive into that so hardcore. Be like, I saw this text once, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I really feel like our best opportunity to combat toxic masculinity, um, which I've heard some people say, you know, oh, that's the colonizer's way. But I feel like that's part of like the human condition to want to be more powerful than other people. Was it played out traditionally in the same way that we see it now? I don't know. But I do know that one thing that our people have is we have cultural belief systems and practices that when applied to an individual will help them overcome these things that we're experiencing. And that is like the most important part in my mind. But before I go on too long, man, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, Josh, I've been your friend, your homie, brother for a minute, and I just always enjoy hearing how you speak about just our connection to our first mother, and to creation, and always having that big picture um, connection, and clarity um, your in your relationship to community and to your family. And I think that showing love, to your point, from one brother to another is just as important in combating toxic masculinity, because oftentimes we're supposed to be at odds, and you know who's more woke, who's more spiritual, who's more this, even when we put it in the context of our native communities, it's like some of those ideas that are not exclusive to colonialism, but as you said, to the human condition of competition and everything else, they get addressed by the work, by the praying, by the prayers and the singing and the service that our ancestors have done since time immemorial, like, and in our tribes in different respective ways. across the world. And I feel like that's like where it's at, having these conversations on how specific relatives from different places, how we are more um, inclined, one, to share this information because we love each other. Like I show love for you, you know, and want good for you and your family, where it's not a competition, where it's like I genuinely want good things for you. And so I wanted to quickly jump in and say that, and just again express that gratitude to you. Um, and I again want to say, I flipped my keyboard in a crazy way. Uh, I wanted to say that um, it was critical right now when you said we could jump into all the text messages, the phone calls, the stories, a lot of traumatic events that will let us identify, you know, some of those behaviors to great detail, and it's painful. And I think that it is smart for us to look at, um, instead of focusing on those, um, to have that space where we can talk about like a good healthy way to navigate through these experiences, and again not to negate the experiences happen. It's about just trying to approach things from different angles. And I wanted to add on to what I was saying a little bit earlier, where we're not here to excuse behaviors. And I think it's important to understand that there's a way of being critical and constructive about certain behaviors, um, where even when we have some of these conversations, it makes people feel uncomfortable because they might feel attacked, because maybe they've done some of these things, maybe they were quiet when they saw these things happen. And I think that that level of accountability is important, and to instead feel attacked, or instead of feeling attacked, to say, where is this coming from? Why is this conversation happening? Why are we focusing our energy on this? And a lot of times I've seen with people like you, Josh, and others in NWI and I20SP, and a lot of our friends and extended family, when we start to talk about things from an abundance based approach, and when we talk about healing, it just makes it much more manageable to confront those situations when they happen. And so I just wanted to say right here, right now, I am Sarah's partner, and I am every day still trying to be the best person I can be for her as her partner, and to be a good father to our baby girl. And there are things that, still affect me and bother me from my childhood, and things that I've seen, and even in our current, world, that can play onto your mind, and how you interact, and can really start to, like, yeah, just affect you in negative ways. And so I just wanted to really put that out there, that it's still a journey. And I know we say this in different power hours, and we say it in different circumstances, that healing is a journey. And so as we look at this topic of toxic masculinity, there are plenty individuals that I can think of that have gone through some really tough situations, and very publicly. And there's been people that ask me, they're like, man, Tomas, I messed up. Straight up, keeping it 100. I messed up, bro. I just can't get back in anymore. No one lets me in because I messed up, because I hurt a lot of women, because I hurt a lot of people. What do I do? When is it my time to heal? And I was like, that's a big question. I mean, we should be healing. When is it your time to have a platform? When is it your time to teach certain things? I can't answer that question for you, unfortunately. But there's a lot of that. I feel like there's a lot of our um, brothers, a lot of male figures that have messed up, and that are wondering what are some of the best places to start, and how could they approach their circumstances in a meaningful way that is respectful to the healing survivors that they affected. And that might be a whole other conversation, but it sounds like that popped up like an idea right there, Josh. Do you want to add more to that?
Yeah, man. I feel like there's a ton of great concepts, teachings that like help that thought progress. And I feel like we could comfortably go into that conversation while also addressing um, and being real about like toxic masculinity and its effect like in our communities. So, dang, dude, that's big. Um, the the best thing that I can do, the thought that came to mind is like my mind just kind of like goes on not one line, but like sounds lame, but teachings. Like I use these things that I've learned, and like drawing parallels between the natural world help me. So, predatorial animals and herd animals. Let's start with that real quick. So, herd animals like dogs, horses, elk, deer, things like that. They teach us about how to be with family, right? And so, why many of our plains nations like had younger people learning how to work with the horses, because that time with that horse taught them how to be more honest with themselves. It also taught them like how to be patient and have a good work ethic, blah blah. One of the things that you notice when you're out there hunting is well, like one quick story is we were tracking an elk a couple years ago, Shady and I, another good friend of ours, and when we were hunting, it was snowy. We were like, oh dude, this elk looks massive, and the scat looks pretty fresh. Start going up, and there's a cat print, and there's also pretty big cat prints. So we're like, all right, we're out of here. Start turning around, and we're walking back. And as we're walking back up this ridge, back onto the road, one of the other young men, Tech, who's another one of the homies, is like, "Oh, what's going on? Like, nah, dude, that elk's out of here. Like, that cat either killed him or was chasing him around, because he's a predator, and the elk is the prey." One of the teachings that like that experience reinforced for me was when there's a herd, there's a predator. So there's many ways to like see predatory behavior play out in our community. Most of the time when we hear the word predator, because of like community events and so like social media, mainstream media, it's like, oh, sexual predator. There's a ton of ways to like to live out those predatory behaviors. I saw someone talking about an ex controlling boyfriend and a traumatic like relationship that they had in the comments. Definitely, dude, definitely. It could be like, I feel all this pressure from work and I don't know what to do with it and I have no one to talk to about it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go home, be nice to my wife, but mean to my kids. Toxic masculinity. Another way like of that playing out is is like, oh, I really want to date this girl. And so I go and ask her out. She says no. And then I start like bullying her online. Like, you're terrible. Nobody's going to date you. You got greasy ass hair. Like, all these things. So there's another way of like, of showing toxic masculine behavior. But I think what's key here is these are predatory like behaviors. You know, the reason why, like the instance where the boy asked the girl out, he was not dating her before. He did not own her. He does not like have a right to her time. She said no. The reality of the situation is nothing in his world changed. He was hurt, and now he's going to take it out on someone else. Like, totally theoretical, definitely happens. But yeah, like in my mind, uh, it's definitely like where there's a herd, there's always gonna be a predator. And when we get together and we're like on our healing conferences and stuff, I'm not sitting around like, which one of you punks is the one. But it's important to realize that, so that, and tie them to teachings and real world experiences so that we can see them when they're coming. That's one of the blessings of our cultural belief systems and practices again. And the reason why I say that is because like, man, Tomas is right. And these guys who have approached Tomas, like, they're right too. Going back to like our teachings, everyone who draws breath is gifted that breath from creator. They are gifted that breath from our relatives of the plant nation. They eat food. They are blessed by the same animals who offer themselves to sustain us. They drink water. They are taking in the physical representation of love to our peoples. They're taking in, they're being sustained, and they're gifted another day. They go to sleep every night, and the moon of our sisters rises to watch their spirits while they're unconscious. And then the day comes and it gives them permission to be free, just like the rest of us. They might choose to do something different than the freedom, like with their freedom, but they're gifted those same things. Why? Because they're worthy of those gifts. So our peoples have gifted us these belief systems, these teachings, these practices. When we tie principle to practice, the wisdom of those things become alive to us. When that happens, like we as individuals and as a community will have the ability to reach out in a trauma informed way and be like, hey bro, um, let's show you another way. Come on, you were born into our people, you are a gift to our people, let's help you out. Now the timing of that, isn't like as soon as it happens, like, oh, there's some toxic masculine person next door, I gotta go make sure I go heal him. Like it takes its time when it takes its time. But I think yeah, I love that idea. Like Charlie talked about it at Wellness Warrior Camp a few years ago, the call-in culture, and it was brought up actually by Shailene, and something that happened in their community too. Her uncle brought that up to her as well. Like they're having a discussion about like call-in culture instead of a call-out culture. Again, not to excuse any behavior. Like these things absolutely need to be addressed, and the hurts that happen, like they need to be realized. But address doesn't just mean talking about your feelings. In some cases, it's going to the police. Even if they're family. Like we have to keep our people safe and gotta protect ourselves too. But there's always time to be able to call back in those people, right? Because what's happening is they're hurting people, and Jolene says it all the time in our trainings. A number of the trainers like hurt people hurt people. Our way of being invites others to be that way. That's how it goes. But those are just some thoughts that came as you were talking.
Thank you again, Josh, for those big picture connections, and then like some really great examples of how toxic masculinity manifests. And I think you brought up another good point of this idea of labels as well. Like toxic masculinity then becomes a label. And some people might think if only it were as easy as like a marker that says non-toxic on it or toxic, you're like, oh yeah, see, he's a non-toxic and he's non-toxic, and oh, there's a toxic one. Like it's not like that. And in fact, I want to bring up the fact that when we have labels like this, it does become dangerous if we're not understanding why we're saying the things that we're saying and in what contexts. But before I go into that, the big picture thing that you said, Josh, that really stuck with me is this level of compassion to our relatives and an understanding that we share the mana still, that we share energy together, that we're still part of it together. Even if people are doing deplorable things, there's a compassion enough to say, you still are worthy of good things because you deserve to heal. However, if I'm setting up my boundaries and my family needs to set up our boundaries to stay safe, and I cannot participate in your healing for my own safety and for my own well-being, then respect that boundary. But it's easier to say sometimes than to do. But what I hear, and I didn't mean to mince your words at all, Josh, is just like this level of compassion for individuals in our community that have made mistakes. And again, it's like, I think back to some of the other aspects of the natural world, as you were saying, Josh, of water when it's traveling oftentimes will choose that path of least resistance in the sense of how it's going to flow over the rocks and flow through a path. And when I think of that, it's easier sometimes for us to label somebody because now we're armed with that word and we just say it and we rule them off and that's it. And we don't think of the repercussions that has in their life, in that person's life. Or maybe we don't have a good understanding where we're trying to identify, is it toxic masculinity or is it something else? And I think it's important to look at that deeper. And then there's the aspect of the person that's being either the predator or the abuser. Again, that path of least resistance is like, I've heard people express this to me directly. individuals, like straight up stories of like frustration, like, okay, I see how I messed up now. I want in right away. I want to be back in a community. Like, this is taking too long. They want that efficiency. They want that instant gratification of, like, I see it now. Okay, my bad. Let's keep it going. And we see this happen to comics, comedians, all these big celebrities and different things in life, uh, where we see people with large platforms and they're like frustrated because of their business side, and they want to just get back to making money or doing this. And it's like, no, like, we're talking about keeping communities safe. There is a process. And you mentioned one process, Josh, where you have the intervention of, let's say, like, some kind of police. Then we think of our other interventions of council, and of our elders and our community members, and a vetting system that say, this is how we maintain a safe place. These are the things that we know, the facts that we know in our community. This is how we are going to proceed in this situation. And I think, excuse me, that's a whole other conversation of how we address toxic masculinity, when we see it. But I'm just, again, so grateful that we're like just jumping into this. And Josh, if you feel okay, because we still have about 20 minutes left, but I'd love to show Tacona at this time, which is the short film that we created through I20SP. And I think it might spring some other ideas, and expressions, as well as maybe some questions will come up too from our relatives watching. So go ahead, Josh, before.
Yeah, just before we jump on, I think that that's like a super key point, because in talking about like, oh yeah, we got to call in those people and really be understanding about that, it can hurt. I have family members, siblings, dude, who have like gone through these terrible relationships, breakups and divorces, and that can be hard to hear. And so I just wanted to kind of paint like a little bit of a picture of what I mean by that, and what I believe I'm hearing from Tomas as well. As there's this parenting strategy that they use, and the example that they use is when one child hits another. So let's use my baby girl, my baby boy. My baby boy hits baby girl, and she starts crying. So we come in, we're like, hey, what's going on? And immediately mom will go to baby girl. I'm sitting there talking to baby boy. And then he starts crying because he feels bad. He's realizing what's going on, and he's like, oh no, I feel so terrible. Um, what what has been advised in these situations is to encourage, like my boy in this situation, like, go take space, man. Go take space. And not to coddle and comfort straight away. The reason for that is because they're learning to understand what it means to take responsibility for their actions. And if they do something wrong and they feel bad about it and they get comforted straight away, the next time they do something wrong, the thought and feeling might be, oh, I can just cry and show that I'm remorseful and then get this attention. And it takes away from what actually happened. And he's crying because he hit baby sister. Baby sister's crying because she got hit. And that is where we focus. We focus on she got hit. So go over and take care of baby girl, send baby boy away. And that space is time for him to be able to feel his feelings, learn how to regulate, understand, and then act from that understanding. We'll come back now, let's talk. And in that way, both parties are taken care of, and we're able to like reestablish a healthy norm. This in community, again, can look very different. The, hey bud, you need to go take space, like we said, could be jail time, bro. Like, could be you need to go to treatment, could be you need to leave the house, you can't stay here. I don't know where you're going, but you can't stay here. So that's what I mean. I think that there's like in what we're talking about, uh I just wanted to put that out there, because as soon as you were saying like God, what were we talking about? Encourage, like we were talking about the call-in culture and encouraging like people to take action. I've been seeing in the comments what people have been writing. So I just wanted to clarify that, and I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I'll pass it up over to Tomas. I know we got the video going.
Thank you, Josh. I think sharing that teaching from Charlie was really important too, about the difference between call in and call out. And I've even seen it in different meetings, work meetings and otherwise, and even with my family, like bringing that up. It's like, what are we doing? Are we calling out here or are we calling in? And sometimes that it has a profound message of what we're doing, and if we're coming from a place of love or a place of hate. So thank you for really like honing in on that, that it's a calling in a loving way, also in a way that is safe for ourselves, right, and safe for our families and our communities. um, yeah. Let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and play this particular short film. It's very short, but I did want to preface it a little bit with how it came about. And it was this small grant that we received thanks to Shay, who saw this opportunity and applied, and we put this application together. And it was to specifically talk about mental health in Native communities. And it was wide open. We could talk about anything that we wanted to address, any thing that we wanted to. And we chose toxic masculinity and how that affects a young male protagonist through his, you know, life experience, and how basically he can look at some of those things that he felt and understand them through indigenous teachings and find a place of balance and peace in his heart as he understands them, almost like a loving embrace to himself, but also an understanding of these important relationships um, with our mothers, whether it's our first mother or Mother Earth, or our mothers that gave us life. And so I'm very happy that our team was able to do this. And one of the most beautiful aspects of it is this was a set. We were on set creating art together, and we needed to apply the same practices of saying, we don't want toxic masculinity here. How are we going to make a film that addresses toxic masculinity and have toxic masculinity on set? That's not going to fly. And I'm very grateful that the fact that I20SP exists, the Indigenous 20 something project, and through the mentorship of the Native Wellness Institute, which I20SP is a project of, it just made the experience so rewarding in so many ways, where we were even seeing our own peers in ways that we might have not seen before, because we were taking healthy risks and we were discussing things in depth about toxic masculinity. And so Josh was on set. There was different versions of when we created the film. There was an initial one, and then my paternal grandmother passed away, and that affected me majorly. The team, in seeing that happened to me in my life again, even and especially my brothers, they express so much love and support, where sometimes we don't see that in community. And so again, I encourage that we don't assume that our brothers are strong, they're going to get through it, that we don't cry, that we don't feel things. And so I felt very supported, and it turned into another iteration. And after I went to pay tribute to my grandmother and honor her life, and be there with family, then words came for this particular version of Takona. And I am reminded by Chalene Joseph, the executive director of NWI, that a lot of the words that come really easy like that come from our ancestors. That was partly my grandmother leading the way in this expression, so that it can be taken in by our community, and we can look at it, and hopefully good things come from it. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and play Takona. It's a very, very short film, and it stars a couple people that we mentioned, Tekpak Gouetzin, and Shadron Joseph, as well as Sierra's in there for a glimpse. Shailene will be in another version, the 2-hour long 3D and pyrotechnics version. I'm just kidding. But without further ado, I want us to kind of clear our mind a little bit, and just have a space as if we were gonna listen to poetry and expression. And so I'll go ahead and share my screen now and play. I'm stranded. I'm stranded like the braid that rolls down my back, protecting the spine that formed inside her womb. But I'm also stranded like sneakers hanging on a wire, because I wouldn't walk into the jokes that said my sisters are anything less than our matriarchs. If each vertebrae were a prayer, how much have I nursed my back to carry myself as a warrior and not another destroyer of the sacred bond that gave me life? The homie said I can't take a joke, that I'm in my feels. They get mad at me saying that I'm acting like the very anatomy they treat like another cold cut from the neighborhood deli. Same shit at the 9 to 5. Dudes making comments under their breath, daydreaming of how they could get a coworker to undress for the weekend. Come Monday, and they reject her like she's out of season. I've tried to be a real one, but I've started to slip. I'm brokenhearted and my pride is taking a hit. I know hurt people, but still can't make sense of where to begin. Some say original sin, but my people were here before those concepts came in. Then the dots start to connect. When I think of the time my uncle used to call collect and tell me we are now the results of the white man's settlers complex, he said, how could we get ahead when they view us as a tribe of bobbleheads, mascots, and figurines, stereotyped and trolled way before there were memes? He said, when they look into our eyes, they see slot machines. I want to soak my mind in a cedar bath, remind myself that I come from a sweeter past, blessed by sweeter grass, where I can hear my mom's laugh. But damn, I almost crashed. I almost took my life, then realized that my soul is intertwined. And when I say I'm stranded, I mean I'm braided, built of something divine, the strength of a woman, resilient since immemorial times. Two wolves like to visit me. Which should I feed? One wolf shows me love, the other shows me his teeth. All right, thank you. Thank you for watching that. I quickly wanted to jump in and just shout out a couple of other people. Alexis Salih did the sound design on there. She's from Alaska native, and so grateful to her. I'm grateful for Art with Impact, which was a fiscal sponsor for this that created that grant, and another shout out to the Noise Foundation, because it's fiscal sponsors that like this that allow content like this to be made that help us, you know, put these works of art and conversations out there. And I wanted to say, each time I watch it, even though I was very involved in the process of making it, um, I take away something new. And again, I feel like that's our ancestors teaching us. Again, like there's something more there. Josh, in the film, there's an aspect of letting go, and it's something that sticks out to me. But and I could talk about after if you like, or if you want to talk about that specific thing, just open to it, and wanted to see what some of your thoughts are after watching it right now. And then we could also have questions from our viewers as well.
Yeah, that end, like the image of him of Tekbot walking down the road with that big American flag in the background, and then um the image where like the slot machines are rolling behind the ice. I thought that was really cool. this time. I paid a little bit more closer attention to that just because I don't know. I've kind of gotten that recently around where I'm living right now. People are like, oh, freaking Indians, man! You guys think you just have all this money? I'm like, for Oklahoma, man. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Anyways, at the end when he burns the head, though, this kind of like letting go, and then couple that with the line of two wolves come to visit me. One show me love, the other shows me his teeth. Which should I feed? Like, I think in terms of this, um, in terms of like this conversation, like, damn, dude, that's a big question to ask. You know, there's a lot of pressure, unfortunately, because of social norms uh, for young men, right? Because on the one hand, you have the family, your home. Hopefully, things are going well there, and you have some like positive role models somewhere in your family, if not immediately in the home. And then on top of that, like if you're blessed to be able to be connected in your community geographically, you know, or online now through Zoom, because a lot of communities are doing these kind of like storytelling, language classes, things like that online. Then you have those, but then you weigh that against like how many hours do you spend on social media, bro? Like what kind of music do you listen to, and what are the images being shown in these videos? What because those things are usually what your friends are watching as a young person, and when that happens, uh, that becomes like the conversations that you're having, you know. Um, and the reason why I thought that was so big is like that image, the idea of being a young person today, a young boy, and letting go of those things to be able to step up into manhood is freaking huge. And the pressure of like, I do like the love for sure, but if I don't feed this other one, it's gonna bite me. Like that fear of anticipation and the draw between the two. It's intense, man. It's intense. I know from growing up in Oklahoma in the '90s, um, at least there, that there was a lot of pressure to let go. Oh, not sorry, not a lot of pressure, but there's a lot of pressure to engage in like toxic behavior. And it feels like the more that you engage in that behavior, the harder it becomes to let go, because people again begin to identify you as that. You might even have done it for so long you think that that is who you are. We're never what we do, right? That's why we always strive to be better. Um, but yeah, my immediate thought was just thinking like that's a tough decision to make as a young person without mentorship, without like facilitated experiences, like people guiding you through those times. Oh man, it's hard. It's really hard.
I love that you brought that up, Josh. It's like having access to just material like that, or conversations that are trauma informed, that are indicative of healthy relationships and respectful relationships, are sometimes hard to come by, and we don't see them as often as we need. I did want to shout out one of our dear brothers and another Indigenous father, Thosh Collins, who he and his partner just put out a new podcast through Well for Culture, talking about Indigenous fatherhood. And so I just wanted to drop that in because I have yet to watch it, but Thosh and I have had some conversations, and I'm just looking forward to that, and this resurgence of what fatherhood looks like through an Indigenous lens, and having um, good teachings, you know, in the forefront of what we're doing in our roles as fathers. And so that's something I share with you as well, Josh. And I look forward to learning and growing with you through this process, and sharing knowledge. I quickly wanted to add that in that symbolism of this tokenization of Indigenous people that we see in Tacona, this head that feels so heavy on his shoulders of this is the way that mainstream culture treats me, as this mascot, and it's damaging to me. It's toxic to my spirit, to my soul, to my being. And then I have this other force of people and community telling me I need to be a man, and this is what it's like to be a man, or this is what it's like to be Indian, or an Indian man, you know, a native man. And so then that act of letting go and burning um, that that mascot head is very loaded. It's very dense in a lot of things that this character needs to let go of. And you said it, Josh, this is a hard time in a lot of our youth's life, in a lot of our lives, is being at these crossroads and between these forces that will continue on throughout our life. We know and we understand the universe as being in a balance and having these two forces in constant effect. Um, and at the same time, I wanted to just say that um, in the end, we end on that high note because we are worthy of good things, and it's not. And there's a particular line that talks about how heavy it can get, but even as heavy as we think it can get, there's just still so much abundance, so much beauty in our communities and in our connections that we can make it through these tough times, even when we make mistakes, even if we were at one point quiet when we saw certain things, our awareness, our mindfulness of it, and our eagerness to want to do better so that our communities are protected, that is important. And I celebrate you and I appreciate you for doing that, for taking that time. Josh mentioned it, the times that you just need to be with yourself and process um, some of these things. But when you need help, also asking for that help. I know we're getting close to time, so thank you, uh, Josh. I just wanted to. I hope we didn't go too far off, but I'll go ahead and um, pass it over to you.
Yeah, no, bro, definitely not far off, man. I think I mean, I always love our conversations. For everyone watching, these are the conversations we have when we get together and hang out. These are the things that we're talking about. In closing, because we're right there at the end, I just like to say there's a training Native Wellness Institute is putting on. It's called Choosing Respect and Ending Violence against Women in Indian Countries, and it's going to be hosted by a number of different trainers by the Native Wellness Institute. Check it out on our different social media pages. Man, get registered, be about it, get amongst it. We would love to see you guys there. The last thing that I want to say before I pass it back over to Tomas is I really do think that that's one of the best approaches, if not like the be all, then definitely to begin with, if you're struggling with how to deal with these kind of things in your life. The concept of my son, baby boy hitting baby girl, baby boy hits baby girl. Our focus is not on baby boy. As a 3-year-old boy, he's crying because he feels bad. Our focus is on baby girl because baby girl got hit. Um, if you are experiencing or someone that is experiencing toxic masculinity in their lives right now, or toxic behavior, relationship behaviors, please reach out and do something, because it's great to have these conversations, but there's a lot to be done when we begin to live from these conversations. Please focus on the person who figuratively is being hit. um, that's violence, man. And just to clear the air really quick, violence is defined by a hurt, not a hit. And the person doing the hurting doesn't get to decide when the other person hurts. So let's reach out. Let's look out for one another, and let's trust that when that person who is doing the hurting has to take space, that they'll be able to come back. Our cultures, our families, our love is big enough. Whether it's you, someone else, or just ceremony in general, let's do what's right. Let's take care of each other. And I need this. My daughter's growing up. My son's growing up. My kids need good role models. Thank you for joining us on this Power Hour. I'll pass it over to Tomas.
Thank you, Josh. All caps to that. Ooh, that's a deep thought right there. That it's not just a physical hit, and we know that there's different types of abuse, emotional abuse, and a lot of things that can harm our communities that we could also group into lateral oppression. But just like Tacona and just like this conversation, I want us to really think of on the solutions. And part of that is this idea that our mentors teach us through NWI of what is lateral love? What does lateral love look like? So in talking about toxic masculinity, and seeing it in our communities and us being able to now maybe be more ready to identify it. What can we do today and tomorrow and in our lives in practice to show lateral love that will in effect also address toxic masculinity? So that is what I asked for. And I also want to express my gratitude, Elakwa, for your time, Josh. And again, to the Noise Foundation, to NWI, to everybody watching, to my partner who's in this home with me right now and our baby girl. Love you all. Thank you.